back to another episode of the BioHub. Today we have a special guest in Jerry McLaughlin, CEO of Life Biosciences. With over 30 years in biopharma, Jerry has been instrumental in development and commercialization of more than a dozen FDA-approved drugs. His impressive career started at Merck and went on to leading roles at Endo, NuPathe, AgeneBio, and Therapeutics. Life Biosciences is dedicated to extending healthy human lifespan by targeting the biological causes of aging. In this episode, we'll explore Jerry's journey from big pharma to biotech startups, his path to becoming a CEO, and the innovative work at Life. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Jerry. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing great, Max, and it's really a pleasure to be on your show. I've had a chance to view it, and it's quite an honor.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing to have you, Jerry. And look, we'll just start off with you, and yeah, just talk about your journey from big pharma to the startup world.
Yeah. So if I encapsulate it at a very high level, what drives me is I tend to get uncomfortable when things get comfortable. And that's really driven a lot of my choices along the way and led me from large pharma down to the startup world. My first portion of my career, about the first third of my career, was at Merck, as you mentioned, and a tremendous company, right? Tremendous science, commercialization, America's leading company, 5 years running when I first started, but a real fertile ground to learn. And it's being in biotech, I couldn't have asked for a better foundation because of such a respect for science at the organization. But there hit a point in my career where I was looking for the new challenge and taking a step away to a smaller company, but still profitable at Endo before then eventually making the leap into the startup world. As you mentioned, I have over 30 years, in fact, coming up on 34 years in the industry, which I can't believe how fast it goes. But I'd say this key point and a memory for me was after I left Merck and went to Endo, was there for a number of years, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But it was a decision to take the leap and join a 9-person startup, early stage biotech. And it was that classic story. I was 39 years old, about to turn 40. My wife was 8 months pregnant with our third child, and she was definitively going to take a reduced role at work. And I was looking at this opportunity to take a pay cut and leave a very comfortable position in Endo, which is a highly profitable company. And it really gets back to what was driving me personally. And that was to look for more accountability, responsibility, and move beyond from developing and commercializing brands and building teams within large organizations to actually being part of building a company overall. And so took that leap of faith, after talking with a number of venture capitalists and really just being real interested in what that challenge could bring to me professionally and to those around me as well.
Yeah, I think there's really no good time to make a move like that as well. I mean, it sounds like yours really wasn't a good time, but I feel like there's always an excuse of why you shouldn't do it now and delay it. Do you almost wish you'd done it sooner, or do you feel like you timed it perfectly?
That's always a good question you ask yourself, right? And there's always, I think, in my heart, I wish I would have made that change earlier. However, there's a reason why we take the steps and we're successful or not in certain situations. And I think for me, having that foundation at Merck in a very big organization that was basically a continuous learning experience with some of the best and brightest people I've ever worked with. Making a transition, the first step, to a smaller but profitable company with Endo Pharmaceuticals, I think allowed me to sort of make a transition before really jumping into what I'd say the deep end of the pool with a pure biotech startup with less than 10 employees. And so as I look back, I think everything happened for a reason, and it allowed me to grow in terms of professional experience, management experience, as well as weaning my way away from the large pharma company, right, at a nice mid-size. So I think it was a good transition for me. And so looking back, I say, no, it was probably for the best that I spent the better part of 17 years, half of my career in large and medium-sized pharma.
What was it like when you actually made the move? Was it a bit of a shock? Was it a bit like what have I done kind of feeling or
Max, I think I spent the first 2 months crying every night in my pillow. You think you have this idea of what it will be like in a startup. I think what I failed, and I think many folks would do this, and they might if they admit it, is the the real focus on capital and resources. And I got to tell you, within my first week when I left Endo Pharmaceuticals to join NuPathe, we're sitting around at a staff meeting, and so by the way, we ran out of capital in 6 months, and we'll start fundraising. And there was this thing called a pitch deck. Had never been part of that before. We always had money. Money was just always there,
yeah,
right? With profit organizations. And within 2 weeks, I think I had my first presentation at NEA, which was one of the top venture capital firms in the country, not knowing what to do and never having experienced it. So that was a challenge and a shock to the system. And I think the other big shock was we would complain in big companies about lack of resources, or we didn't get the budget we wanted. And then when you join a biotech, you really don't have resources, and so you really have to learn a lot about yourself. You have to rethink how you approach development of strategy, execution, on tactics, and where you source your information.
hmm
And you learn that you nearly need to leverage your relationships and think about what is the top priority, right? So it forces you to make those types of decisions. So what I'll say is, when I joined, it was a shock to the system, but Max, within 2 to 3 months, I never looked back.
yeah.
I knew this is where I wanted to be for the rest of my career, was in smaller organizations where it could really make a difference and be part of a team, to help develop organizations and to develop medicines that could really change the world.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And when we last spoke, you actually talked about the transition into startup and how Endo was almost like a really good part of that transition. You went as number employee 125 to, and you saw a growth to 1,100 employees. What were some of the key factors that helped the expansion? And do it sustainably as well, because that's what a lot of companies are really struggling with nowadays.
Well, first of all, we have to have great products, and I think sometimes what happens with small companies. I had joined Endo to launch what was their flagship product. It was a pain product in phase 3 development. 1 year into the job, I received a call on a Sunday night. We have some disappointing news. We failed the phase 3 trial, and I thought the next words out of that was going to be, "Thank you for your employment at Endo. Good luck in the future." But it worked out nice. I actually got a promotion out of it, and we kept. I learned there about resolve and focus, in a small organization, and really identifying additional value drivers. But really, what made it great, I have to say, were the people and the purpose. And the people, it started at the top. There was a woman, Carol Ammon, who was an incredible CEO. She had vision, leadership, compassion, and purpose. And so we had a real mission, really, to help people in pain.
hmm
And so we were a pain management company, and that really kept us really focused. And then the assembly of individuals. And I had spent all of my career at Merck, and Merck, very few people left Merck, so it was a very insulated environment. Endo was built based upon the experience of those who came from a lot of different pharmaceutical companies. So I learned there were different ways to approach business problems and strategies and tactics, and as well as being able to build relationships. And I'd say it was a magical time, because this is where it really gets. You can have great products, but if you don't have the right people, we had, I think, what it would be considered, when I say is, nirvana, commercial and R&D working hand in hand. And we still joke to this day. There were times you'd be in a meeting, you'd forget who was the scientist and who was the marketer.
hmm
We'd sort of flip flop roles within the course of a meeting. There was very little ego. We had we were very focused on the mission at hand, and I think that really made a difference. And another thing was the environment. And I've kept this. We learn things along the way in our career that we keep as really good ways to approach business. We were very lightly staffed. We had 125 employees, but we were supporting a $350 million business. And So we had areas of the business that were gaps in terms of responsibility. We didn't have sales training. We didn't have really business development support or strategic marketing. This was all throughout the company. So what it provided was an opportunity of what your job description was every day, but then you had an ability and almost a necessity to contribute well beyond those borders.
Yeah.
And so when you have an assembly of individuals who thrive and welcome that situation, that's where it becomes a pretty magical environment for growth, satisfaction, and success. And so we were able, and we were compensated accordingly for those achievements. And so that allowed, I think, for me personally, but for a number of my colleagues who've done extremely well in the industry coming out of those days in Endo, allowed us to grow at an exponential rate personally because of the ability to and the the stressors to contribute well beyond your job description.
Yeah. No, it's inspiring actually. You think of what companies wanted to do, and I suppose biotech's a little bit different because it is dependent on your science. I think the way that it was done was great. I mean, also just looking at your path beyond that transition to startup, I just want to talk about how you became CEO, some of the major milestones and decisions that led to that. Yeah, I suppose particularly at your time at Neos and Agene as well.
Yeah, so I guess the decision point for me was as NuPathe was wrapping up. We were acquired by Teva Pharmaceuticals, and we were in that period of time post-announcement and pre-closing of the deal. And Max, I was talking to folks like yourself and seeing what the world, what is my worth? Testing the market, right? Conducting my own personal market research on my brand. And what I was learning was there were a lot of opportunities to repeat a chief commercial officer role. I had taken something from very early stage with a deep commercial background, even prior to NuPathe, all the way through to a transaction, right, an M&A. And so those opportunities were there. And that was intriguing because it would have been fairly comfortable, right?
Yeah.
But the other road was to take that next step forward and assume the reins and have full accountability and responsibility at the top. And I having had the opportunity to sit side by side for 6 years with two CEOs, very different styles, but both very valuable. It gave me an opportunity to learn and observe, and to the point, once again, thinking, yes, I can do that job, and you hold your breath. And I took a leap and went to a 4-person startup, a spin out of Johns Hopkins, and took on the CEO role. And how times changed where your comfort level with risk. I think I joined, there was $1 million in the bank at the company.
Okay.
So that was it was balancing this risk reward and the opportunity to learn and grow. And so that milestone was the M&A, and I think sort of that need to put myself once again in a challenging situation personally.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a really rewarding experience, right? With so few people and looking for avenues to raise capital. I'd moved from traditional hedge fund, raising capital from traditional hedge funds and other investors, to family offices and high net worth individuals. And this was an Alzheimer's asset being developed. And so there was a nice challenge, and the science was quite different in neuroscience. So it provided that tremendous opportunity. And then also working within an academic spin-out type situation provided unique challenges, but also really interesting learning opportunities. And then getting the company funded with NIH and NIA grants, really novel ways, right? You really find ways to secure capital in any way necessary. So it was a tremendous experience there for a number of years as well. And then I think the next transition, I hit another point where I felt like I was getting to the flattening of the curve of learning there. We stayed a really small company, and I was approached about joining a commercial company, public company, and an opportunity to transition from a private company CEO to a public company CEO. Was a company that was really a turnaround opportunity, Neos Therapeutics, with commercial products, a manufacturing facility, scheduled products on top of that, an R&D organization. And so, unfortunately, the company was burning roughly $12 to $13 million a quarter, $50 million a year on 20 some million in revenue, and with a significant debt instrument overhang on the company. So I was tasked with coming in, which I loved. I relished in this challenge, and never having done it before, was to revisit the whole corporate strategy, commercial strategy, get the expenses in line, but continue to grow the revenue. Right, that old challenge. Let's spend less and generate additional revenue, and in a public company. So it provided a lot of challenge, and what it forced me to do was to really think about an organization that was a little bit larger. It was closer to 300 people, but make really tough decisions. And that's what they don't tell you about the role, CEO role, when you're making really tough decisions about people's careers, but necessary decisions for the health of the business. And so that was a major learning coming into that organization, because it was basically survival. And we were able to raise another 40 some million in capital, restructure our debt. We introduced an entirely new commercial strategy. We were able to streamline spend. I brought some individuals in I'd worked with previously. Brought in a chief commercial officer I'd worked with at Endo. And over the course of 4 quarters, we were able to reduce the burn from 12 to 13 million a quarter. We were down to our EBITDA was negative $400,000 4 quarters later.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really interesting learning experience, not without its pain. And, and if anyone says it's easy making those hard decisions when organizational structure changes, I can't even imagine that, right? It's probably the toughest part of the job. And I think it's one where I've told people, if that stops bothering you, then really you should find something else to do. But tremendous learning experience, the pressure, tough choices, no perfect right answer going forward. But something I think really, I think took my experiences and skills to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, when you're making those hard decisions as well, like especially letting people go, how do you maintain like a good atmosphere around the company, feel good, that we're going to get through this almost? Like, how do you, keep the rest of the people in the company?
Yeah, it's hard because you're naturally, Max, there's no perfect solution.
Yeah.
And you're naturally going to lose additional people. There's just some who can't handle the change, right? And frankly, they may look at the risk, right? When you make those types of changes, it's not typically in a business where everything's going extremely well.
Yeah.
And so you are going to lose some folks. I think transparency, honesty, and quickly laying out what the vision and the rationale for the changes and the vision for the company going forward, and being honest and transparent as possible with your employees. I think that's the best you can do. And it's not going to work for everyone, right? Because every situation, what's perfect today for an individual for their career and their personal ethos and what they can handle may not be, as companies evolve and change. It may no longer be the environment or the stage of a company that's appropriate for them. And so we worked through that, and we tried to identify the types of individuals we wanted to hire and bring in. We changed sort of the profile of those individuals. We needed folks who were more flexible, versatile, a little more grit, and entrepreneurial spirit, where you can handle flexibility and somewhat some uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so that's helpful as you bring those individuals in. Of course, learn lessons along the way. Perhaps we should have done more and made more change, even because you think you can. Sometimes you think I'm going to need to make X amount of changes or reduction in force of this much. Perhaps maybe at some point it's better off restarting, rebuilding.
Yeah.
But you learn these lessons along the way.
Yeah. I think that leads on really well to our next question. I mean, you spoke about the culture shock of going to the startup world, and it's so true that it's not actually for everyone. Some people don't quite fit the mold. What personality and traits do you believe are essential for thriving in the fast-paced, high-risk environment of biotech startup?
Yeah, so I think it's someone who embraces uncertainty, who relishes in problem solving, and possesses and demonstrates an intellectual curiosity to ask questions. Ask questions across the organization, because we don't have that many individuals, right? So to ask questions across the organization and be intellectually curious about what else is happening outside of their area of expertise.
Yeah.
I think those are really important. And then I think it's really understanding whether what someone says in the interview process, or really digging into their prior experiences, behaviors, and attitudes as to, can they embrace change? Can they embrace uncertainty? I think that those are critical elements. And I'll reflect back to what I mentioned earlier about my experience at Endo. Is it someone who is very rigid in terms of the responsibility and role within the organization, or are they someone who's willing and excited to contribute beyond what's their job description?
Yeah.
Right. And then I'll give you my easy ones, the lessons learned. If someone is concerned about their office size coming to a small company, it's probably not the right fit. And when you think about really trying to dig in and understand how they view things like budgets and capital. And the reality is, in a small company, you have one overall pot of cash, and the money is going to be allocated to the areas of the organization that drive the most value.
Yeah.
And usually, typically, that's R&D. And so really finding individuals who understand that and embrace it, that it's not about them, it's about the we, and it's about the mission. And so it's teasing that out based upon their experiences and doing situational interviewing. And I will have to say, in a startup as well, it's a great place to leverage your broader network as well in terms of hiring.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about Life Biosciences a bit more. So you guys obviously focus on targeting the biological causes of aging. What makes Life special, and why are you passionate about the work that's being done there?
Yeah, I think what's not to be passionate about. I'm an economics major by training with an MBA, and I look at the economics of an aging global population and our need. I think there's an existential threat to our economies with this reduction in global population that we're starting to see.
Yeah.
First in Asia and parts of Western Europe, and it's coming. We're not quite meeting our replacement population here in the United States. So to me, it's essential that we are able to increase the health span of our population. That is, and what I mean by that is, we live healthier for longer. So it's not necessarily about the length of your life. We're not talking about immortality here or living to 150. But if your later years are more productive and less burdened by disease and illness, you can live a happier, healthier, more productive life. And also, it has economic impacts as well. There's less of a burden on society, because we're moving to a situation where the number of persons under the age of 65, I think leading up until now, was roughly about 6 for every individual over the age of 65. It's going to reduce to 3 and only get worse from there. So we need a healthier population so they can continue to contribute and have less need of care. And for overall, frankly, for satisfaction and happiness in the world. So that's what we focus on. And then everything comes full circle. In my early days at Merck, we were doing tremendous work in treating elderly individuals with things like hypertension and lipid lowering and osteoporosis. But what I reflected on was, we were treating symptoms. We were targeting receptors and sort of putting Band-Aids on the disease in a good fashion, right? Very effective. I'm not understating it at all. It was amazing.
Yeah.
What happened over time was, as technology advanced and science advanced, really understanding the underlying systems that drive aging. And when I was at Merck, we talked about aging was sort of natural wear and tear. It's just what happens. We hear it on the news today with a lot of the political environment. This is what happens when you get to be 80. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to happen. It's not natural wear and tear. There are underlying biological changes that drive the aging process.
Yeah.
And we now are able to target those. We understand that biology a lot better. And there are a number of them. There are, anybody different, everyone has a different number, but there could be 12 different targets of aging, right? Biological drivers of aging. And at Life Biosciences, I felt that the science with particularly with our lead program in partial epigenetic reprogramming. And what that is targeting aged and injured cells and being able to rejuvenate them to a more youthful and productive state, and thereby not just treating symptoms of disease, but actually having this ability to reverse disease process, right, and reverse disease symptoms. And so to me, that was just fascinating. And we had a founder out of Harvard, David Sinclair. The work is just amazing. It led to a cover article in Nature, and really showing that we're able to restore these aged and injured cells to a more youthful state. So for me, it was, and to be able to come in as a CEO and be part of building this team,
Yeah.
and advancing the science that could have a major impact, that, not only in specific disease states, but then thinking about this overall issue of an aging, unhealthy population, was too good of an opportunity to pass up.
Yeah. Are there other companies with you as well? Like, you have main competitors in the space, or maybe is it an area of science that's potentially overlooked?
No, it's actually, Max, even in the 3 years I've been here, the amount of capital and company development has been amazing.
That's so good.
It's a highly interested field. You're starting to see large pharma actually focus on longevity and aging biology. And within partial epigenetic reprogramming, we like to believe we're first and we're out in front, and we're flattered that many others are joining the game. There probably are at least 10, if not more,
Amazing.
epigenetic reprogramming companies. We're real believers in our technology and our product and our IP, but there are others joining the fight, and we don't view them as direct competitors because we're in a field that's so nascent at this point. Still, we're early in the game.
Yeah.
Still, even though it's been around for a while, but we're really starting to see a tipping point where, and we could talk about it in a little bit, about companies coming from academic discovery and taking these discoveries and transitioning them into innovation, right? And so we're sort of on the edge there of taking this nascent field and making it real.
Yeah.
And companies like us, and there are others as well. One of the companies in our field is a very large company. Raised $3 billion, right? Altos Labs, and so we think that's great. We think that just brings so much attention to the space, and we like our position of where we are today.
Yeah. I actually dislike that I just used the word competitors, to be fair, because you're right. Like, in this industry, it's like we're all working towards the same goals. I had a similar conversation with Paul Peter Tack, who's the CEO of Candle Therapeutics, and their main competitor, at least closest company to them, was CG Oncology, who did that outstanding IPO at the start of this year. I think it was like a 450 million IPO. And he was talking the same way that you're talking, like how happy it was that, people are investing in the space, and that's only good news for them, who are then going to follow in that path. So yeah, I think it's incredible.
Yeah, I think something unique about our space, and there probably have been other stories like this in the past. The aging space, aging biology, there's a whole range of ways that it's been approached, from supplements to lifestyle changes, and so some of that could tarnish
Hmm.
the image and what we're trying to accomplish. And this whole idea, the easy for the media, the easy thing to talk about is living forever, right? One of the things and what I'm glad a number of other companies in the space have adopted, we focus on real science, high degree of rigor, regulatory pathways where we can generate data for a real indication that serves an unmet medical need.
Yeah.
And I think that's been really important. I think that's one of the biggest changes in this field in the last 3 to 5 years. And I'm proud to say we've sort of assembled the team of, we're all long in the tooth biotech experienced individuals at our management team. We hire molecular biologists and drug developers, and bring folks along here that allow us to meet the standards of the FDA, and meet or exceed, and also meet the standards of what a big pharmaceutical company would look for and an asset. And I think that's an important point, Max, as we move forward in this field, because there will always be the supplements, there will always be the lifestyle changes, and many of those are really interesting and important, have generated decent data. But I think it's important for us and for to communicate that we operate strictly as a biotech with that level of rigor in the science.
Yeah, amazing. Right, and one subject I always love to talk about with execs like you is it's more mindset, how you tick, and for you especially, like the decision making part we've been talking about quite a bit. So if we're talking about stress, making critical decisions under pressure, how do you manage that, like mentally?
Yeah, I think it's evolved over time, where I'd say my stress level variance would be great, a high beta in the early days of working in a startup world. But I think you get to a point where you have confidence in your pattern recognition and, frankly, the people around you. And I think that's critical in a startup to handle the decision making and the stress.
Yeah,
Is to have highly competent, highly experienced individuals on your team. And so the way we handle the stress and the uncertainty is we don't over process our approach, but we have realistic scenario planning. So we're prepared for what are the most likely 2, 3, 4, 5 outcomes of any whether it's a clinical outcome or a financing outcome or a regulatory outcome. We're prepared with a plan, and we share that with our board. We're open and honest. We make a recommendation, but we have alternatives. And so when you do that, it does allow you to operate in a level of stress and clarity, a lower level of stress and a greater degree of clarity. And I think there's over time, as you're in this smaller world, a big part of everyone's job description is problem solver. And so you learn to really accept that that's just part of the day to day here. And so I think having individuals on the team who think like-minded that way,
yeah,
I think helps maintain a level set for the entire organization and for your board and your investors as well.
yeah. I think it's a funny concept. I mean, I've been reading quite a bit into it as someone part of right big part of a startup now as well, where things are stressful, especially in this market as well, if we're talking truthfully. Um, and like the mindset that I think I resonated with most is like almost the mindset of a monk, where they can meditate, they can take their mind out of that situation and almost come to a mindset of, what does that really matter in the grand scheme of things, when you really break it down. And I found, at least for me, the way I think that helps quite a bit, which is, I suppose, more spiritual way of putting it compared to. I like the way you put it in terms of planning and making sure you're prepared for each scenario, but also, you came in to problem solve.
That's right. No, I think you make a good point in terms of just keeping that level and that calm,
Yeah,
right? Because you tend to make rash and bad, I wouldn't say bad decisions, but we tend to make rash decisions that may not be as thoughtful if we lose our cool, right? And I think it's things you learn is to slow it down. Sports analogy, right? It's that rookie quarterback in the
yeah,
NFL,
yeah.
and they, everything's moving so fast at hyper speed. They've got to slow the game down a little bit to where they kind of know where the game is going,
Yeah,
and they tend to make much better decisions in that situation.
I couldn't agree. Yeah, that's where you see experience versus inexperience in those sports scenarios, especially. Um,
Yeah.
and then, like, as an add-on to that, and this is something I struggle with. I think if I didn't have people around me, I would quite happily work 14, 16-hour days, 6 days a week if there was no one there to stop me. How do you maintain a healthy family dynamic, especially for all those demanding startup experiences?
Yeah. Where it's evolved for me, and I have 3 children. They're moving along the teenage years. One in college, one going to college, one in high school. So We had some important years there. And I would say earlier in my professional / family life, I didn't balance that well. I was gone a lot, right? And and still we work very hard, as you know, as you do, and everyone else probably who's listening to this. To me, I view it as there's 24 hours in the day, and we have personal, professional, and personal in terms of family, personal in terms of personal health. And then it's really allocating those 24 hours in a way that meets the needs of everyone involved. And I got to tell you, in our situation, we have board members and investors all over the globe. And so we're working on timelines where night is day and day is night for us, right? And so it's not an 8 to 5, right? And so to that end, it's understanding where and how you can allocate time to your children, to your partner, to the dog, right, and to other fun pursuits. And so what I've done is, for me, early morning is my time. And so, as you know, in a busy day, once the day gets started, you have a lot less control. But early in the morning, from 5 to 7, is usually a good time to focus on your personal health, with exercise, and maybe spend time with the kids before they go to school, and then before you start your day. I think the other thing is, what I've done is I've melded my personal calendar with my work calendar. And what we do is I don't go out of my way to say I'm never making any of the activities of the kids and my family. I think they're part of my calendar.
Yeah.
Where they are on the priority level. I'm always going to tell them it's top, but there's going to be times and situations, and having a team, and I work openly with our office manager of when the business takes priority over the personal. And I think that's the only way to really balance it, because otherwise it quickly, as you said, it quickly turns into a 14 to 16 hour day, and Monday turns into Tuesday, turns into Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And before you know it, you've neglected your personal life. And that's not healthy over the long term. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And if one's way out of balance, it's going to affect the other.
Yeah.
And so it's just trying to, and they're never going to be perfect. But it's about trying to maintain that. I'd be lying here if I said everything was perfect and I'm always spending perfect amount of time with the family, but it's not proactive. It's not intentionally scheduling them out of your life. It's doing everything you can to maintain that.
Yeah. I think, I'm not at that point yet. I've not got kids or anything like that, but it was Bill Gates who I've looked quite a lot into, and he got to the point where he said, I don't believe in holidays. That work always took priority on everything, but it was only, I think he had a statement recently where he said that all changed when he became a father, and it was almost like a realization for him, which is crazy how you can go from one complete mindset to the other, because of that change.
Yeah. But I think it's also important, though, to set an example.
Yeah.
Right. It starts, right. Your attitudes and behaviors as a CEO or even my executive team, we talk about this, right? That sends a message to the rest of the organization. And we're at a point now where we are a pretty experienced organization. I'd say most everyone here has 20 years plus of experience, but we just made our first college hire. That changes now. We have to set the example, mentor about how to work hard, how to balance, and that there's balance needed at all different stages of life, right? And it's just going to change a bit in terms of what that balance looks like. Just because someone doesn't have children doesn't mean that they don't need that time, right? And so it shouldn't be just for those who have parents. But so we really work hard at that to let people know that their personal pursuits are important, and they need to have those, and that's a priority. And that's part of our culture, and it's very important to us, because at the end of the day, Max, 34 years has gone by very quickly, and you don't get 34 more. You can't go back and do it again.
Yeah.
So I think that's important, and to kind of embed that in our culture. I think folks appreciate it, and when times are tough or demanding, then they're all in.
Yeah.
Right, because they know they have the latitude to make sure they're having other life experiences beyond work.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the word you used there in terms of mentor, the college graduate, um, rather than manage, it's almost like, we want you to progress professionally, but also look, growth mindset, personal growth, all of that is so important as well. But yeah, I just want to finish on one last point as well, Jerry. So just looking at life and in the future, what milestones have we got to look forward to?
Oh, Max, you're hitting us at a great time. We're really excited about our lead program, the epigenetic reprogramming. And we call the product ER100. So that's our first. And what is it? Gene therapy that delivers these things called transcription factors,
Mhm.
OSK. Leave it at that. And our initial target indications, and we think there are many other opportunities beyond this, but are for two optic neuropathies. One being primary open-angle glaucoma, which is garden variety variegenital glaucoma, one of the leading causes of blindness in the aged in the U.S. and across the globe. And so we think sight is really important, right? To be able to restore and preserve sight. Vision, there are many studies that show that loss of vision in the elderly is only second to Alzheimer's in terms of concerns
Oh wow.
about what would you most not like to have happen to you, because really it creates isolation, which then leads to physical and health decline. So the one indication is primary open angle glaucoma, large population, long impact on health span, and the other is something called NION, non-arteritic anterior ischemic optic neuropathy. Max, for short, it's like a stroke in the back of the eye. It's anywhere from historically 2.3 to 10 out of every 100,000 folks, so about 6,000 new cases every year. Basically, you wake up in the morning, it's painless, and you can't see fully out of one eye or one quadrant of one eye. And unfortunately, there's nothing to treat it today.
Wow.
Much of that vision loss does not come back. And once you have it in one eye, you're roughly 5 times more likely to experience it in your other eye. So it can be really debilitating, and it's age related. It typically starts to happen after the age of 50, but increases with age. We think it's an important and acute event. So we like this in that we have both a chronic disease, large population, and a smaller population in NION. And then just recently, last week, NION has taken on a new importance. There was a study that was conducted, a retrospective analysis looking at the use of GLP-1s and an increased incidence of NION. So there's a 4-fold increase in NION in patients who are taking these GLP-1s, right, for weight loss or diabetes. And so it's really risen this from an importance level, given that roughly there are about 15 million people in the United States taking GLP-1s now. And there's a Goldman Sachs report that estimates by 2028, it could be as many as 70 million. So we think we're doing important work here with NION. And so where are we in the process? We met with the FDA in December and reviewed our IND enabling package, which lists the last animal studies before we move to human trials. We expect anywhere from third quarter of next year in 2025 to early 26 to have filed an IND and initiated phase 1 clinical trials for both glaucoma
Amazing.
and NION. So we're very excited about that, and we believe we'll be the first epigenetic reprogramming platform to enter clinical trials, and for these optic neuropathies, it really could make a big difference, because once again, what we're looking at and the evidence we've generated to date, there were a tremendous number of animal models in mice looking at age reduction in these aged mice, looking at visual restoration of visual function in mice, and then actually looking at an optic nerve crush model where you had regeneration of axons, right, that were dying or dead. And so that was really exciting. But the big step forward for us last year was we moved to a higher level species, which is a big deal in the preclinical world. We moved to a non-human primates who, in the eye, their eye has this similar structure to the human eye. It's about half the size. And importantly, they have an inner limiting membrane, because we're delivering our therapy to the retinal ganglion cells. So we do that through an intravitreal injection. And we were able to demonstrate that we could deliver it to the target. We see expression in the retinal ganglion cells. We were able to restore visual function that was lost. We did this in a NION model. So we were able to induce NION, replicate the experience of the human condition. So where you have loss of this visual function, and you're also losing retinal ganglion cells. So we were able to take views of the eyes of the primates, and what you see is significant retinal ganglion cell injury and death. And in the untreated group, it's significant.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we were able to actually see in our treated group, not only restoration of visual function, but we believe what we're seeing now is a preservation of more healthy axons and a restoration, sort of improvement in these, we'll call them sick axons, and restoring those to a more healthy state. So it's phenomenal data. It got us excited. It led us to kick off our manufacturing campaign for gene therapy, which is not a small decision. So we did that, and we're racing towards met with the FDA, and now we're conducting these last animal trials before we get in the clinic next year.
That's so exciting. That's incredible. Thank you so much for coming on, Jerry. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you, Max. I really enjoy it, and congratulations on all your success. I think it was a great idea, and I love seeing you bring this to light.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Jerry. Please like, subscribe to BioHub, and thanks for coming. Thanks, Jerry. Welcome back.